pleased to say I'm also joined now in the studio by political commentator Bisi Alimi. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. You heard us talking about the new president-elect, General Buhari. Lots of hopes placed on him as he prepares to take over the mantle of leadership on the 29th of May. What sort of reforms will he need to put in place, particularly in the army, to tackle more effectively the Boko Haram insurgents?
I think I'm going to join the bandwagon of people that that had this huge belief in what Buhari can do. And I think this is coming particularly from the fact that he happens to be an ex-military officer. He has the knowledge of how to handle and reform the Nigerian army, which, if we remember, is one of the reasons why Goodluck Jonathan was voted out, was because he failed to be able to curb Boko Haram. And people got really, really upset and they wanted him out. Apart from all the rest shenanigan that was happening around him, it was very much about the fact that it took him a long time to talk about the girls missing. It took him a long time to actually make decision to go looking for the girls. And when you look at the way he talked about the girls missing, it's very much about, it's none of my business, so if they can't find them. But now there's so much expectation coming on Buhari about the fact that you have to be able to reform the Nigerian military. You have to be able, just like you talked about, be able to gather enough intelligence that can at least lead us to what happened to these girls. And talking about the report from the UN, we still do not know, whether these girls are still alive or dead. And if they are dead, who killed them? We can all assume that Boko Haram killed them. In what way? Like you said also, we know that Boko Haram was were using these girls as
human shields.
As human shield. And not just that, they were using them as suicide bombers as well. They were sending them into the cities to kill people.
Well, they were using girls. We don't know if they were using the Chibok girls.
Yeah, they were using, well, we don't know. Where did they get those girls from? Are these same girls, the Chibok girls? We know that so many of them have been sold into trade. We really do not know. And all the things we're talking about are pure speculations. And I think this is one of the things that Buhari will have to address.
I mean, the hope, of course, is that General Buhari will also have, as Sarah Firth pointed out there, greater empathy, because he's from that region. He's a Muslim. And, of course, his party, the APC, is also in control of the state governments in those northeastern states. So the hope, of course, is that, we will see more action on his part. What concerns a lot of people, though, is the fact that he talked about focusing on intelligence gathering initially, which obviously is an important part of any operation, but it suggests that this is going to be a long, drawn-out affair. No,
but this is the first thing to do. I don't expect him getting into office come May 29 to say we're sending our military into Sambisa Forest to go and look for these girls or to curb Boko Haram.
Well, you'd hope he'll build on what's being done
exactly,
at the moment.
Because something must have happened. We must have some information right from the beginning when they started. What is it that we know? What is it that Jonathan knows and nobody knows about? And these are the things that we really need to gather again, look deeply into, and be able to trace who is behind Boko Haram. When did it all start? Because this was something that just started just like that.
And that is where you're going to need, aren't you, the cooperation of the wider region, which is what's being done to some good effect at the moment, but also the African Union needing to, as it were, work better with affected governments, not just Nigeria, but, Al-Shabaab in Kenya, the Maghreb region in sort of the north, Mali and all those places, to coordinate a speedier, faster response to problems of insecurity across the continent.
And we should not forget that Boko Haram is not just a problem of Nigeria. So it's a problem of Mali, Chad, Cameroon, and all the countries around that, Niger. And also we should also remember that Al-Shabaab is not a problem of Kenya. It's a problem of countries around the Horn of Africa. So we really, and unfortunately, the African Union has lost its power. And I think this started when good governance and democratic structure in Nigeria started falling apart, right from after military rule. That Nigeria as a country was not taking its place in the Committee of Nations, most especially within the African countries. So I'm expecting something to happen with the election of Buhari, that intelligence and military power will be restored on the continent of Africa. hoping that Buhari will see himself as playing a statesman role on the continent, being possibly one of the most powerful head of states from that continent, and then be able to reform. There's a serious need for a reformed African Union, or else we will keep seeing the disaster we're seeing on the continent of Africa.
Of course, these quarantine measures, good for the fight against Ebola, terrible for neighborly relations in Africa.
Exactly, and what it's going to do is to create a stigmatization, just like we saw in the case of HIV and how it went out of hands on the continent, where you can easily be labeled, and because of that you get removed from the community, and that is what is happening now across areas affected by Ebola. Like you said, it's a good thing, because that's one of the best way to prevent the spread of Ebola. But unfortunately is the finger pointing that follows, and the shame that a particular family will have to carry for having an infected person amongst them.
But there is no alternative, is there?
There is no alternative, and I think the response to Ebola, just like the response to security on the continent, has been very, very slow, has been your problem, not our problems. And until we have a structure in place that sees our problem, that sees a problem in Kenya, in Uganda, in Nigeria, in Mali, in Niger, as an African problem that needs African attention, we will continue to see situations like this, which will further put already poor people in a very difficult position and make living really difficult for them.
And that's a very good point. And in addition to the fact, of course, that, as you mentioned there, the social impact that this is going to have, there is also the potential that the subsistence farming, which is the way that people actually eke out an existence, are able to feed themselves, is going to be affected as well.
Exactly, because people will not be able to go out and farm. And just not that, even people that have regular jobs will not be able to go back to the office. And we should not forget, Sierra Leone is one of the poorest nations in the world. And there's no social security. So how will this family be able to have access to food? Now we're talking about water, and it's such a big shame that in 2015 we're still talking about the issue of toilets. There are so many underlying issues that we really need to talk about. And also, we've not really gone back to where did it all come from? All of a sudden, that we have this huge outbreak. And how do we prepare? Because this is not the first time, we should remember. But how do we stop this from repeating itself in 10 years' time?
Yes, that's a good point. It's never been on this scale, though. But I think you're making a very good point there, because what this has laid bare is the weakness of the systems in those countries, the health systems, and the fact that they need to be beefed up and strengthened. And of course, there are other collateral, there's a lot of other collateral damage that comes out of this. We talked about the social impact, the impact on food. There is, of course, people like orphans, for example, who have nobody to look after them. If they're not, tied to the extended family, there's the potential it could also have an impact on employment.
We've not dealt with orphans from AIDS. We're still struggling with that. You go to Uganda now, you see have a huge amount of, even in Malawi, huge amount of children who were orphaned because of AIDS. Now we're seeing another type of orphaned children on the continent of Africa. And what is going to happen, these children were the same kind of children that were lured into the war in Uganda. We're just hoping that nothing like that is going to happen in Sierra Leone, because what will happen, this case has no future. Then we will see a reemergence of, the Sierra Leonean war, because there's already a ready army of young children who are disillusioned about what is going to happen to them. And that is why I think this should be addressed. Yeah, we need to curtail Ebola, but we also need to put structures in place that will protect the future of everybody affected.
Briefly, what sort of structures, what sort of psychological support will the people need there?
We need a support. One, we need to bring down stigma. We really need to bring down stigma, because once we're able to bring down stigma, we will conquer everything. Because then when I know my neighbor has been cured of Ebola, I can reach out and touch. But now people are still scary, and it's not going to work.
On that note, Bisi Alimi, social and political commentator, thank you very much indeed.